All right, good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is the October webinar. We'll be going through new features in 2022 R2. So what we're going to do is start with an upgrade overview. So understanding the versions and resources, the different schedules for the upgrades, what the upgrade process looks like, and then also understanding some resources and materials that Acumatica provides that you can use during the upgrade process. John Rosine will get into some of the new features, including more GL related, so company localization, multi-currency by company, some bank feeds. And I will say that that bank feeds piece, that there's a lot of features there. So we'll actually have our next webinar to deep dive into that topic, GL error detection. Then we'll go into the software. I'll show you what the new journal entry approval workflow looks like, some new reports in terms of inventory turnover, and some enhancements in the manufacturing module. And then we'll end with some usability tips. I will say, as we go through today's session, please use the chat feature, and Tanya will actually accumulate your questions, and we'll go through those at the very end. Okay, so just a bit of background into versions and what Acumatica offers. So first off, there's a lot going on with each new release. I want to give you guys these two resources that once you're logged into the portal, you can access. So there's two things. There's the product release notes and product ideas. So if I click on these release notes, the really helpful thing here is that this takes me to the page where I can see all the Acumatica 2022 R2 downloads. I can download that version. If I scroll down, I can see all those release notes as well. So if I just click on this here, there's 300 pages of release notes here, so it can be a bit overwhelming. So what we've tried to do today is really pull out features that are salient to most of our customers, but certainly if you're looking to understand and deep dive into, how do I do integration with bank feeds, obviously all the detail is here. So that's a really nice resource for you to use. The next one is product ideas. So a lot of the features that Acumatica rolls out with each version actually comes from community ideas. And so we'll send out these links at the end of the session today. But what this goes through is certainly different ideas that other customers on Acumatica have recommended. And then once they get enough votes, then Acumatica R&D reviews these and puts them into their build or makes that decision. So you can see all the different types of things that you can suggest enhancements for, and then you can certainly vote in this voting tool here on which ones that they should work on, right? So clearly this one got the most votes. So those are some nice resources to use as you proceed. There are new versions in the spring and the fall. So there's an R1 and an R2. Today we'll obviously be looking at the R2. And with each new version becomes new functionality, new features. So that's released twice a year. Now, between the versions, every 2 to 8 weeks, there's always builds and updates. So you may have had perhaps a bug in Acumatica that we had to do a build upgrade on. And so in between these version releases, there's different builds. Now, when we talk about the upgrade process, that only applies to moving to a new version. It doesn't apply to the build. So when we implement a new build or publish a new build, you don't need to do any testing in between then. It can just simply be applied. So as Acumatica releases new versions and new features, they have a product support lifecycle. So what this means is that for 18 months, you will be supported on that Acumatica version. So as an example, Acumatica 2021 R1, that is the initial release for that was September 22nd, 2021. The expected retirement of that is July 31st, 2023. So what that means is that we encourage everyone to upgrade annually. But if you have not yet upgraded by that July date, there's no consequence to the software itself. It's only that if there's a bug or an issue, Acumatica support, they won't support it with a build or a fix. So we really encourage everyone to upgrade at least once a year. Just get on an annual cadence. Perhaps it works for you to do it in the fall or the spring, and then we can support you through that process. John or Tanya, anything to add to this support lifecycle?
No, I think just deciding what cadence might work best, depending upon busy seasonality, those sorts of things. So, but our customers that generally get on that cadence, it just becomes very routine and less impactful to the business because they're just used to doing it once a year.
Okay, so I wanted to just quickly go through for folks who haven't before what the upgrade process looks like. So the first thing we do is the planning, right? So we talked about, Tanya mentioned an annual upgrade. So let's think about, times that your team is probably less overloaded. So, maybe not at year end, for example. So in planning, we think about, let's assemble a list of, perhaps test scripts that you use during implementation. Sometimes things can change through the different versions, that maybe a database table has changed and that we need to just have a peek at those custom reports or any custom inquiries and make sure that they're rendering appropriately. There might be some fix to do there. If you have a development customization where it's a customization package, want to pull up in those test scripts again and make sure that that they're up to speed so that when our team upgrades the code, those test scripts can be executed. So this is just the planning, kind of thinking through the lift for your team to just go through and test your workflow, test your procedures, look at any custom reports and inquiries, and plan as to when the best time to do that is. We can also help you through this process as well. Just want to give a summary. The next thing that Acumatica does is, as part of the SaaS subscription, it's included in the cost, they'll take a copy of your production site and actually create a brand new instance of that upgraded site. So they'll take your data and put it into the new instance, and you get a 90-day time window that you can actually test that in. So what we'll do is we'll go through, we'll look at all those reports. If there's a customization, we'll publish those customizations with the changes in that sandbox site, so you can safely test there without impacting your production site. So this is kind of this nice sandbox that lets you go through and test all the features and how things work. Once that's deployed, we'll also tailor the training according to your workflow. So you saw that 300-page release documentation. So we know your flow pretty well, so we can help to kind of pinpoint where you should focus your testing. And of course, that's followed by this piloting and acceptance. So if you have developer customizations, you can execute those test scripts. Otherwise, our team can do that as well if you crunch for time. And then, typically there's not such robust changes that a lot of end user training is needed, but sometimes there's features that can be helpful and make their lives a little bit easier. So you may want to include some end user training in there as well. And then certainly we'll go live. And I just put this in there because that's typically a question we get. Hey, do I need to reset up any users or passwords or any data conversion? The answer is no, none of that is needed. What Acumatica will do is we'll schedule your upgrade a few weeks out, and you just kind of log in the next morning and everything has changed. There's no conversion or passwords or anything to worry about. So it's a pretty smooth process. So in the last slide, we'll have some next steps as to how to contact us and what to think about in terms of upgrade. But certainly the message, just to summarize, is we'll send out these links. There's a lot of release notes to go through. We encourage you to add to the community list of ideas. And the versions are released twice a year, in the fall and the spring, and they're good for about 18 months. So really think about what version you're on, what new features you could be using, and reach out to us certainly to help with the upgrade. Okay, so now we'll kind of transition and get into the actual R2 features and start with Canadian localization.
Awesome. So looking at the first two items here, we're going to take a look at features that were primarily set at a tenant level within Acumatica that have now moved into a company basis. So starting here with the Canadian localization, that is one of them. So historically, we were able to enable that across a tenant, but now we're able to select a company within Acumatica that has that Canadian localization applied. So that allows you to balance between the Canadian entity structure and the US structure that you would have in the system. And so what we see here with that enhancement is the support across a wide variety of printed reports, printed forms, calculations that occur. You can see on the screen here, one example of that is that cash discount calculation, unique to Canada with balance less tax total, multiplied by that terms percent. And what's helpful with this applied at the company level is that if you switch between entities, that recalculation will occur. Also, you'll see enhancements for the Canadian localization around the T5018 form, and you can see the e-file screen available as well. And then also too, on the printed forms. So one current limitation around this is how it gets exposed to the sitemap, but you can have unique Canadian forms that once applied to the sitemap can be accessed and toggled. And you'll also find additional functionality around tax registration numbers and printing parameters for Canadian taxes. So overall, again, moving it from a tenant-only feature to that company level. And as Andrea progresses us into the next slide with the multi-base currency support, we'll see that a similar feature that had been set at a tenant level historically within Acumatica, but in 22R1, so the version earlier this year, we saw a multi-base currency support within the tenant. Now, similar to that Canadian localization feature that I just described, we are now able to, as of 22R1, we are able to select a base currency on a company basis within a tenant. So a lot of functionality around consolidation, where historically with Acumatica, we had to have individual tenants set up to accommodate this and have a series of connecting workflows for consolidated reporting. So what I want to highlight here, though, for 22R2 is that they're continuing to focus on the multi-base currency support across modules. One of those here that I have identified is the manufacturing support available in a managed release. As of right now, I know they're still working through the payroll integration for multi-base currency support. So we'll continue to see Acumatica invest in that support to allow that multi-base currency to be compatible with other modules. So we saw a limited version in 22R1, and we see enhancements in 22R2 across some of those modules that were excluded. Additionally, you'll see support for contracts and for Dunning letter distribution. So we had some limitations in 22R1 regarding those two components, and now we have the full usability available to us with the multi-base currency option. All right, so again, two options that have been set at that tenant level moved into our company structure. Now we've seen a lot on the bank feed side. We have worked with a number of clients to install a customization package to support bank feed integration. Now, what that is for people that aren't aware, in Acumatica, we're able to import bank transactions. Historically, that was done through a bank file. If we look at specifics, that would be a QFX or an OFX file, for instance, that we would manually load to import those transactions, perform our reconciliation, or set up transaction rules to create transactions in Acumatica. Acumatica began investing in the ability to integrate directly with those banks to eliminate that step for manual upload. And so in versions preceding 22R2, we were able to deploy this native integration with banks through a customization package. Now, we don't have to do that any longer with 22R2, which is a great feature for it to be enabled right there within your site. How it works is that we have a collection of financial institutions. Many US and Canadian financial institutions are plugged into our bank aggregators here. We can see Plaid and MX as bank aggregators that are connected to our cloud service in Acumatica. So that cloud service maintained by Acumatica helps the user interface with Plaid or MX. And what that'll look like is honestly logging in through this platform by entering your credentials for the bank. So you'd select your banking institution, let's say US Bank, you enter in your user credentials, and that sets up the connection. So some enhancements that we see beyond this customization package that had been previously deployed is going to be different visibility into what your bank feeds are, what bank feeds you have available, what accounts are connected, better visibility into that so you can control the accounts that are being connected. because we have a package basis for the number of counts that you can use. You're also going to see enhancements in the retrieval side as well. One of the biggest improvements that we see with 22R2 functionality, though, as indicated by our beautiful red arrow, is the expense management side for the creation of expense receipts from corporate credit cards. So in previous versions where we deploy that customization package, even though we were connected directly with the bank, if we brought in expense receipts, we had to go through a manual matching process for corporate card expense receipts. Acumatica has introduced functionality that allows you to set up a map to map those expense receipt items from your corporate card directly to an employee. And where that gets helpful is that we also have the ability to activate a pre-configured business event to notify the employee, say, you have an expense receipt here waiting your approval. That employee can review that expense receipt, confirm that it's accurate, and that can be routed through your claim process. So a lot of automation around the expense receipts for corporate cards. And as Andrea said, there is a lot to unpack within just the bank feeds integration. I know I'm giving you a high level, but we'll have a session, a webinar dedicated specifically to that. And you'll see a few additional features here, just at a high level, the security around the bank credentials, how we can map certain accounts, and also automated imports. So one of the things that is helpful as you're bringing in these transactions is to eliminate the need for a user to manually initiate the retrieval of that data. We can schedule these processes so that the transactions are flowing into your system on a daily basis. All right. And so quite a bit there on the bank feed side, but we'll definitely dive deeper into that in a separate webinar. In 22R1, we saw the introduction of this, the GL anomaly detection. Now, we had quite a few limitations in that the GL anomaly detection was primarily focused around the reclassification process in Acumatica. And now for customers that weren't using the reclassification process, we got very little benefit out of the GL anomaly detection. So Acumatica has introduced a new level for that GL anomaly detection to look at 18 months worth of history and categorize it based off of 4 areas. And you can see it under the magnifying glass. We have those 4 categories or combinations. So looking at account information, the branch account and sub-account details, account and inventory ID, account and customer, or account and vendor. And so again, historically, it had been in that 22R1 version around reclassification history. So we've seen great enhancements around what we can actually view within that anomaly detection. And as this machine learning process gets trained by you as the user, you're able to deploy the level of learning for that particular feature. It will become more accurate over time to indicate which transactions are essentially out of the ordinary to help support your audit. Right. So give the user a prompt to say, hey, based off of certain expenses that we've seen in the past 12 months, we think this one is unusual. Please validate that this is a usual occurrence that we should now accept into our machine learning, or drill into it, and you can follow up accordingly to make the correction that's needed. So again, very limited in 22R1, but that GL anomaly detection has been greatly enhanced in the 22R2 to support audit function. All right, and lastly here, before I turn it over to Andrea, and she'll actually start with the demonstration of the journal entry approval, is we have a selection of approval options within Acumatica. One that had been highly requested is the GL transaction. So just like we have approvals on AP bills, purchase orders, on purchase receipts, that information now is available for the GL transaction screen. And what we'll see, similar to our other areas in Acumatica, where we can enable approvals, we have the ability to pull in a selection, great selection of fields, pulling from our account, our GL account table, our GL batch table, our GL tran table. And a few helpful applications would be perhaps using it for control account approval. So in Acumatica, we have our control accounts for AP, AR. As we set entries against those, we can set up approval specifically identified around those control accounts to require that level of approval before posting it to the GL. Those are sensitive areas and easy to pick out within the approval map. You'll also see dollar thresholds, time thresholds, project IDs. So on the project accounting side, great to have those routed for the for the transactions that don't just use a non-project code to help balance that GL transaction. And so I'll turn it over to Andrea to go through the actual demonstration of the GL approval.
Okay. All right, thanks, John. Okay, so this is just my demo site. So I've got some demo data in here, and of course it's in R2. So I'm going to just first start showing you the approval map and the approval process for journal entries. So before we create the transaction, I want to jump in here and just show you this new entity type, journal transactions. The message is that everything that you had available to you in the classic approval map features is now available on the journal entry screen. So I have this routed based on my debit amount, but I could certainly change that based on the parameters that John just mentioned as well. So if I go ahead and create my journal entry, I have it routed just to show based on dollar amount. So I'm just going to go ahead and create this entry, remove from hold. Now the status, and this is a new status for journal transactions, is now in pending approval. And just like in other, purchase orders or AP invoices, I now have this approvals tab that I can actually see who it's assigned to. And all the functionality still applies. So I can actually approve this on my mobile device. We won't do that today. But this should also appear in my classic approvals tab as well. So my user is actually linked to Michael Andrews, who it was routed to for approval. And so this is the screen, the approval screen, that this would consolidate or aggregate all types of approvals across all types of transactions that they could go ahead and approve. So if I click in this and actually hit approve and go back to the entry, now the status is in balance. So it's still not released. So at this point, once it's approved, now it's a journal entry that is eligible to then be released into the ledger. Now I can go ahead and release it. Of course, I can also have it released based on the batch as well, but that's a feature. The other feature that I think you just saw kind of a bit accidentally here is what's called the info tips in Acumatica. So previously, all of this information was available in the help section. And it of course is still there. They're trying to make it a little bit easier to show it on the screen. So lots of screens have fields where you kind of wonder perhaps what the definition of that field is. Now I can click on it and hover, and it gives me that definition. The other thing that it can do is if I hit more, it will expose, I guess, a more in-depth analysis, right, of what that help documentation entails. And then of course, it'll give me a link to what I had available to me previously in the help documentation. So that's a nice feature in that I can easily find a definition or what I'm looking for just by using those info tips. Okay. So the next piece of information we want to go through is the inventory turnover, which gives a lot of great data on, the average time it takes to turn inventory. So my inventory module here, I have a new inquiry called inventory turnover. Now I can specify this based on, I have this already coded to a certain company or branch. I have to have it for a period. What I can do is select all of these features. I can also do it specific to a warehouse, an item, or an item class. And I hit calculate turnover. Now, once it calculates the turnover, it will expose to me, essentially the average number of days it takes to turn inventory into sales. And so, I can see here that, this custom bat and this Keurig have a long time in inventory. Perhaps they're taking up space in my warehouse that I don't need them to take up. Obviously, fewer days, the smaller the number, the better the turnover here. So this is a nice new feature in that it'll expose all the types of, inventory turnover that I want to have visibility to. The next two features are manufacturing. So we now have an engineering workbench. And what this allows me to do is change and modify a bill of material and child bomb from the screen itself. So previously what we had was the visual BOM. So in inquiries, we had this visual bill of materials. It was nice in that you could see all the BOMs that were nested within the parent BOM, but you couldn't actually make any changes from this view. It just told you the relationships and how they were set up. What this screen allows me to do is actually, I can put this BOM on hold from this screen, and I can make all the relevant changes. So if I want to make edits to a different BOM within this is my Keurig. I've got a different circuit board. If you can see, if I click on this on the left, it will change what's on the right. And then I can go ahead and actually, modify anything with this nested BOM within this engineering workbench. So, it accomplishes two things. First, it kind of tells you exactly how that bill of material, parent and child, are set up, what the relationships are, and then allows you to make changes within that as well. That's a nice feature. One of the other big changes is to MRP. So what MRP does now is it will accommodate transfers between source warehouses as part of the MRP schedule. So what this looks like, so I ran this already. If I go to my MRP display, what you can see here, I'll sort by my action date. So in this flow, we start at the bottom. This is my finished good. And what my forecast is for is a finished good at this warehouse, at McKesson warehouse. Well, it knows that in order to create that, to arrive my finished good at my McKesson warehouse, it's not actually created at McKesson, it's created rather at Liberty. And so it will have it will suggest rather a manufacturing production order for Liberty, and then this transfer order here. And it kind of cascades back, right? So if we work backwards, I want it delivered to McKesson. It's going to be transferred there from Liberty. It'll be manufactured at Liberty. Well, it turns out the components for it to be manufactured at Liberty have to be transferred first from my Atlas warehouse. So it will take into account vendor lead times for purchasing that manufacturing needs, as well as transfer lead times as well. Before it didn't do those transfer lead times. And so the MRP engine had to be modified quite a bit in order for it to be insightful. So the way that this is set up is if I go to this warehouse, this transfer warehouse, you'll see some new information here. So if I go into my manufacturing tab, now I have this whole new section called transfer lead time. And I can see my replenishment warehouse. I have two different replenishment warehouses that replenish this Liberty warehouse. And now I can put in the lead times, and that's what gets factored into my MRP engine when I run MRP. And so that's a nice time saver for a lot of folks. Okay. All right. The next thing that I think is really going to be helpful is the side panels. So this is on quite a few screens. So let's go to purchase orders. This is also available on sales orders as well. But these side panels here to the right, let's go to purchase order status. So first of all, if I have a line selected, I have this top line selected, I can see the status for this vendor in this side panel, and I can move this out or in as needed. So let's move this out and see what this looks like. So this is specific to Thermo Fisher, and it tells me, not much going on with this vendor. I'm going to actually just take that filter out, and we'll look across all vendors. So this is my purchase order status, and it tells me what orders that I have returning, orders I need to receive, right? It will kind of go through the whole list of everything that is coming in that I need to see. So there's a lot here, and it's all, if you want to see different fields and such, it's all customizable. The same thing is available on my sales orders page. So if I go to sales orders, you now see this list of side panels. So if I look at, let's say, USA bartending, and I want to see perhaps just visibility into this exact order, I can do that just by clicking on that line. So, I can now see the status of all the orders if I want to go to sales order status, and I can now drill into this into the specific order without having to change my page or go to a new tab. So that's a really helpful feature.
So we do have one question. And the question is those side panels and the way you were configuring, is that a customization or a configuration? Is it a combination of both? What does that look like?
It's now included in R2, so it will come out of the box. And then if you wanted anything changed to say, you can have a different icon, right? You can now change it from what you see here. So it's not a customization, it's more configuration. And out of the box now, these features will be available. So there's a whole list of pages that this is available on. There's also, it's on shipments as well, invoices, stock items. And again, in the R2 release notes, all of that is included as well in terms of the summary of where this is. But yes, all of this is changeable, but it's out of the box. There's nothing that you need to do when you upgrade to make the screen appear. The other big changes are similar to these out of the box now dashboards. So if I go to my dashboards tab here, so I have a receiving clerk and a shipping clerk dashboard. I also have, sales, warehouse, and purchasing manager dashboards. And so again, all of these you can change, they're customizable. But what Acumatica has given you is this, kind of basic receiving clerk dashboard. And then we can work with you to adjust this and add to it as needed. So it's pretty user-friendly. So we have a design tab right here that I can go ahead and say, you know what, I don't like this color, perhaps I want to change that. I can click on that pencil icon and I can just set these different values here. And we can certainly help you do this as well. So you can say, I want to refresh the data maybe less frequently, maybe more frequently. You can change, so this is saying that the level that you see normal at, the teal color, is 10. Maybe I want to set that to something different. So all of this is configurable. There's no customization needed. For these types of widgets, you can also do things like change it into a meter rather than a scorecard. We can also work with you to add widgets as well. And this is just the different types of widgets that can be added. So we can actually expose a table. So expose portions of a GI or generic inquiry that you might want to see. There's also embedded pages, so you can have a link to something if you'd like. And we also expose it to Power BI via an OData feed that we can help you with as well. So message here is that there are all these new, sales, purchasing, and warehouse dashboards that you can start with. These are out of the box with R2, and then of course you can we can work with you to help you design and change these as well. Okay. All right. So with that, I think those are all the features that we were going to go through. Let's go into any questions and some next steps. So what we worked through was localization in terms of Canadian localization, multi-currency companies, bank feeds, error detection, talk through some inventory turnover, journal entry approval, dashboards and side panels. Any other questions on those components? Okay. So next is the resources. So again, we'll send this out, but this is just a link to the product ideas page. We really do encourage you to go and vote and add ideas because Acumatica does listen, and you'll see that in their versions as well. Also, I included a link. Acumatica does they do kind of a longer webinar that's almost 2 hours long. That's a deep dive into a bunch of other topics that we didn't have time for today. I'll include a link to that as well, so you can, if you have time and you want to see a deeper view of that, you certainly can. We'll also include a link to the products page and release notes. So if you want to dig deep into that 300-page document, you can do that as well. So upgrade next step. So encouraging you to assess, your cadence in terms of an annual upgrade, assess the new features, reach out to us. I just have the technical support email in there, but if you work with John or me or anyone else on our team directly and you want to upgrade, please reach out. As John mentioned, our next webinar is going to be on bank feeds and corporate credit cards. I know sometimes it's not the most exciting idea, but it can really help in terms of saving a lot of time. I know we hear a lot that corporate credit cards and that reconciliation is a real pain. So we'll go through how to set that up, what that looks like, what that reconciliation looks like. And that'll be on December 8th at 10 a.m. And again, if you can't make it, it'll be recorded and we can send that out afterwards as well. Okay, Tanya, any other questions before we hop off?
So no other questions, but I do want to mention for the folks that are on, and then if you can let your team members know as well, even if you have a conflict, we encourage you to at least register for these webinars so that when you do and you can't make it, you automatically will get a link to the recording of the session so that you can view it on demand. And I think that would have answered a question that's in the queue that said, will the recording be sent out? Yes, it will be. And then you can also forward it to team members as well.
Yeah. Okay. Also, if you have ideas for other webinars that you'd like us to do, please email us. And if you can also email the tech support as well. We're always open to hearing ideas of next webinars. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and we will, I guess, see you guys in December rather for the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.